So, here is part 3. Hi. So, last night I stopped at realizing I was trans, or believing that I was trans. But I have to rewind because there's more. So, let's see. So, so this is going to be about 5 years old. I'm starting at about 5. Okay. So, I mentioned how my stepmother, really introduced me to Japanese culture, and she, um, really, she raised me like a Japanese child. She really did. I wore the clothes, I ate the food, um, I was like a chopstick ninja, like the whole lifestyle. She raised me like a Japanese child in a Japanese home. And the reason why she was really able to do that was because, my dad was active duty Air Force, so he would TDI all the time, TDY all the time. So really, a lot of the time, it was just me and her in the house. I hated when he would leave. I hated it. Um, but one of the things that, I learned was I was introduced to Shintoism, which is one of the national religions over there, Shintoism. So, you know, she would take me to a shrine and they'd bang on the bell, and there's this big, you would write down your requests, and if there was a temple worker, he would, pray on, the person's behalf, or if there was no one there, you would walk up. Basically, it was like this big black hole in the wall, and they would hang, you know, I to be honest, I never looked into the religion and like all of its details. That, it's just it I don't really know that anyone else really knew that much either. It's just what it was. It was more about tradition. But, so there's this big hole, and then there was like a rope with these white, I think they were requests, like prayer requests, but they would hang them in front of it. Was an altar. It was an altar. And that's where you would pray. And um, so I was introduced to, you know, the Shintoist gods, and I was told, that they heard me and that, they would help me. And so I remember praying so hard to make things better, to make my stepmom stop hurting me, um, and nothing changed. Actually, it seemed like things just got worse, so then that fed into the ever increasing, you know, feelings of rejection and worthlessness. I was like, oh my, look, I was struggling with, you know, knowing whether, thinking that my mom didn't love me. Now even these, supposed gods, they didn't care about me either. And I was sinking. I was sinking so deep. And and then that just made me angrier. So let me just, on my anger, that problem itself, by the time I was 12, I had a hair trigger temper. And again, like I said, I was also violent. So I was fighting, I was I was throwing things, I was attacking people. Like It was really out of control. I was out of control completely. There was no, I had no leash, let's say. Like there was nothing. I had nothing. But going back, so Shintoism didn't work. Um, so when I was 6, so actually, okay, when I was 5, my mom, she was in Alaska. She is stationed in Alaska. Um, she's still here. She retired. Um, but she met my now stepdad. She started dating him, and I met him, didn't like him. Um, I didn't like him. Um, one of the big reasons, was he wouldn't look at me the way my dad did. He wouldn't touch me the way my dad did. He wouldn't do any of that. Now that I'm an adult, I know that it was because he's not a pedophile. But, at the time, when I was actively being programmed and already believed that that was normal, I thought it was a sign that he didn't like me, which was confusing. And so I decided that I didn't like him back. Another reason was I just didn't like him. There's something about him, which I'll get to later. I'll get to that later. But there are other reasons why I didn't like him, but I just didn't like him. It was he, and again, I was struggling with my feelings about my mother, and I only had 2 months to be with her, but when I was when I was 5 and I met her, it was like this dude was always there, and I couldn't get, I felt like my voice was drowned out, and I was ignored because they were in love, and I just, so I felt really invisible. So when I was 5, that summer was probably the worst ones ever. I hated that summer. And but my mom, I'm gonna try not to talk too much about my parents, like my stepdad and my mom, just because they haven't given me permission to talk about them. But I mean, I'm not dropping names, so maybe it doesn't matter. Anyway, I'm gonna try not to. But around this time, my mother had become a Christian. She started going to church, and she seemed a lot happier, a lot more sure of herself. And so sometimes, she would come visit me at Yokota. Um, those are the best surprises ever, because a lot of times I wouldn't know until like either that day or a couple days in advance, but she would just come see me, fly 10 hours across the ocean and come see me. And so this one time, and this is when she was really new in the faith, but she started telling me about this Jesus that she now worshiped. And I was very confused, you know, being 5 and being told that, someone died and then came back to life was like, like, what? um, but I remember this conversation very well. I haven't thought about it in years. Actually, I don't think I've ever thought about it. But, you know, she was telling me about him, and, that I had to, at 5 years old, that, if I didn't, get saved and, confess him as my Lord and Savior, that I was going to die and go to hell. And, um, basically, and I, there was something about that conversation. Like, it was basically, I ended up saying the sinner's prayer because I felt guilty. And she didn't seem to notice. She was very happy about it. But yeah, I said it. And I remember at that moment, I not only resented her, but I resented this Jesus she was talking about. Because, again, with everything going on, I had no control in my life, and I felt like they both I felt manipulated. And, obviously that's not an emotion that I can really put into words at that age, but I was very upset about that. So that was like my first experience with Christianity. Not good. So, um, when I turned 6, when I was 6 years old, my mom did marry my stepdad. I got to go to the wedding. It was a beautiful wedding. Um, I cried for like 2 hours when they said "kiss the bride," and oh my gosh, I cried for like 2 hours. It was so beautiful, and um, um, yeah. So my mom got married. They're still married to this day. Um, so okay, I'm trying to work out how to piece all this together as best I can, because again, it's a lot, and it's like a I'm as I'm like taking my notes and I'm thinking it through, like and I'm like remembering things as I go. Like that's what this part 3 is really about. I remembered more stuff. It's just, how do you really do that? Like, how do you organize, how do you organize chaos? Because that's really what it was. It's just complete and utter chaos and instability. um okay, so, all right, we established that I didn't like my stepdad. I was, you know my five being five, that summer where when I went to be with my mom was the worst, because she basically ignored me for this dude the whole time, right? um So, and again, okay, and then in the last video, I explained how my stepmother liked to tell me that my mom didn't want me and she didn't love me, etc., etc. So, during this time, my stepmother decided that she was going to sell stuff at a flea market that was right down the street from our house, like right outside the base. And I don't know where she got all this stuff. Like, I had no, like, it was just like it would just like materialize, and it would be in the car. Like, and I mean, she had like bags and bags of stuff. And so we would go to this flea market and lay it all out. And I mean, music boxes, toys, clothes, blankets, um, mostly little girl stuff. And so, and I would help her sell it. She would, you know, apparently I was cute enough, that I could stand in front of the stall and, welcome customers and answer questions. And it was a good way to practice Japanese too, and how to interact with people. And so we did that like every Saturday. Um, I found out 5 years ago, about 5 years ago, no, 7 years ago, that my mom, when I was over there, that she was sending me boxes and boxes of stuff, gifts, presents, music boxes, clothes, blankets. So that was, no, now I know my mom loved me. I didn't then. It just, you know, fed into my stepmother's narrative. you know. I had no idea at the time. I had no idea. I didn't know that. I never saw these boxes. I had no idea that she was sending me stuff. Like, no clue. I had not an inkling. Like I said, like, I don't know, like, I don't know when they were coming. They were disappearing somewhere in the house. Like, I did not see any of this stuff until it was at the flea market. And again, I didn't know it was my stuff. Um, so, I do forgive my stepmother. I forgive her. Yeah, I forgive her. So, okay. Church. I loved my mom's church. Every summer. So every summer, when I was with my mom, church was every Sunday. And I was always so excited to come back because people genuinely seemed happy to see me. There were like these older people, like they're old enough to be like my grandparents, who I just absolutely loved. So I would look forward to seeing them every summer, and without fail, they were always like so happy to see me. And these are people that did end up essentially watching me grow up, and um, so that was a relief, because I came to Alaska, and people were nice to me, and they asked me questions, and they tried to get to know me. And I didn't have that in Japan. I did not. Even with the kids that I played with, it was very superficial, which I mean, I guess is to be expected when we're that little. But um, so, um, but as far as my relationship with the Lord, I mean, it was non-existent. I was still confused. I didn't understand what the pastor was preaching. And they had the typical black churches, speaking in tongues, people falling over, and it was work based. You had to do this, this, and this, and they didn't tell me. They didn't tell me who this Jesus was. Who is he? What's his favorite color? What's his favorite food? What does his name mean? Things like that. Things that, if you know someone, those are things you typically know. Now I realize they didn't know either. So the only thing they had to talk about was what they thought the Bible was saying, and what they thought, needed to be done, which wasn't completely wrong, but again, it was based on, what you had to do really to get the blessings of the Lord. Like, so, I mean, really, it's a prosperity gospel. It's a watered down, like a little bit more potent version of the prosperity gospel. It wasn't all about getting things from God, but it was pretty close. Um, and, you know, my life didn't change, nothing changed. My mom moved in with my stepdad, and I hated him. I, really strongly was starting to resent my mom, which that resentment did grow into hatred for a time. I did. I hated my mom. More on that later. But, you know, my stepdad, I am very grateful for, because honestly, he's the only dad I've ever had. My biological father was never a father to me. I can remember probably about 4 things he taught me. Number 1, I represented him at all times, so I needed to stay mindful of that at all times. So I had to make sure my clothes were nice and straight, and that I looked put together, because I represented him. Number 2, he was my father, I was his child, so he lived vicariously through me at all times. Number 3, if I was going to have sex, I needed to be on birth control. What was the 4th thing? I'm sure it'll come to me. But those were the 3 main things. I as an individual meant nothing, and I lived for him. Is basically what that what that all equaled out to. So this is all shaping my views of religion, and none of it is doing anything. I'm just more confused, more lost, and like I said, my life was chaos, complete chaos, internally, externally, just absolute chaos. And so all this is going on. So I left off where, I decided that, I wanted to be a boy. And now that Jesus was on my radar, I was pissed off at him, because I believed that he had made a mistake. Like, how could he do this to me? How could you make me a girl, and I'm being molested, and I nobody listens to me, and why? And I genuinely believe that he had made a mistake. That's blasphemy. That's absolute blasphemy, and I repented of that. But what was I gonna say? What was I gonna say? But I remember thinking, just seeing, going through my life day to day, and it doesn't help that in Japan, women are second-class citizens. So, and that's very apparent. No matter, especially off base, wherever you go, that is very apparent. Women are expected to be subservient, very quiet and meek, and and then the men were the men. Basically men could do whatever. The unspoken rule was basically a man could do whatever he wants with a woman, and the woman couldn't say anything. So being raised in that kind of culture, On top of all of this, I started to go, well, okay. And this is, and this is what happens when children are left to their own devices. They're left to make their own choices, and, they have no direction. There's no one telling them, right from wrong, what's up and down. This is what children come up with, okay? So I started as at 8, 7, 8, 9 year old, I started looking at the boys and I said, okay, well, if I'm a boy, then people will respect me more. People will, if I will get generally treated better. People will listen to me. Okay, well, then I'm a boy. That is what happened. I was not born that. I was not born into another. I was not born in the wrong body. I was not. But I was programmed through my everyday life, through, in psychology, we call it negative reinforcement, then positive reinforcement. I was molded to believe that I was supposed to be a boy. It doesn't help that my name is spelled Kevin with an A. So I'll take off the A. I'm Kevin now. That's what happened. I was not. You're not. I feel for everyone in the LGBTQ, and I know they added, and I'm not trying to be insulting. I know they added some letters. I don't know what they are. I feel for every single one, because that they are not born that way. I don't care what anyone says, but they are in immense amounts of pain. And instead of people, and we live in a time now where instead of us looking at them and going, how can I help you? What's wrong? Like actually trying to help them, we validate their pain. And that's what we are doing. We are just, I'm sorry, not we, because no, I'm not, no, I will not, I don't care. But their pain is being validated, and they're being told that their pain is a victory, and it is a lie. It is a lie. I feel so bad for Ellen Page. My heart hurts for her. That is a woman who has mutilated herself. But yeah, so I started wearing my dad's clothes. I was hiding in my clothes. I made sure, like, he was a grown man, so his clothes like hung off of me. Started wearing, baggy pants, baggy shorts, these big t-shirts, to hide my feminine features. It was basically impossible to do, but I tried. And again, this was the 90s, where in an Air Force base, and my dad, who was already a psychopath, was very, very hateful. He was very hateful. He liked to call, gay men the F word, FAG. I can't even say it. Um, and so I knew he wouldn't, yeah, he would have been horrible. That would have been, life was already hell. It wasn't worth adding to it. My mom was a Christian, and, another thing that really turned me off was that she also was hateful. At that time, she was. She liked to say the FAGGOT word. And so, you know, um, at that time, there wasn't as much of, acceptance. So it's something that I did keep to myself, but everybody knew. Okay. I mean, everybody, I started walking different. I lowered my voice. Like, being 8 years old, trying to lower my voice, cussing like a sailor. I started cussing. I mean, it was disgusting, really. I just, and I mean the situation. It was just, I thinking about it now, it's really like, well, where were all the adults in the room? They're like, where were they? There was no one. There really was no one. And yeah, there was no one. I was, you know, I look back, I look back and I see the Lord, but I'm talking about like humans. There were no humans. they they were gone. I don't know. I don't know what they were doing. And things at home took on another element. So, I looking back now, I can see, and again, I keep using the word programming, but it's true. Because even though I was trans, I couldn't help but act a certain way around men. And that basically, I turned into a sex kitten. I was very flirtatious um, and sexual, like very sensual. Being a little kid, and I'm, you know, you know, shimming my chest and smiling a certain way and looking at like grown men, a certain way, very, and very inviting, like just, and you know, um, I remember this story. I was definitely 8. I was definitely 8 years old. And there was this story on the news about a child. She was 16. And she had asked her father to have sex with her. And he did. And my dad, he talked about that for hours and hours. I think, no, days. He like ruminated and like he latched onto that story. Even at that time when I was very much trauma bonded and thought everything was fine, I still thought it was weird. It was weird. He just kept talking about it. And at one point he went, if you asked me to do that, as in me, if he said to me, if you asked me to do that, I wouldn't mind at all. And up to that point, that the fourth thing, there it is. He would always tell me, Kivina, if you have sexual dreams about me, that's normal. Don't be ashamed of it. It's okay. And so up until that point, he told me that. Again, the grooming, man, okay. So, but when that story happened, he started saying it more often. And again, that's about when our interactions got more sexual. And again, he never penetrated me. That never happened. But he tried. He definitely tried. And so again, so when I say, it took on a more sexual element, again, I had boobs, so he basically, grabbed him whenever he wanted. He would, come up behind me and like press himself, like pull me into him and just grab me full on and not let go. So, um, that, and then, but, again, and I just hated myself more and more. And, as children, it's so important. If you have kids, make sure you tell them that you love them. And if something bad happens, like if you end up, leaving their other parent, or, you know, some just whatever, whenever a big event happens, do not let them blame themselves. Make sure you explain what happens, and you make sure you tell them that it is not their fault, because children blame themselves and they internalize everything. I blamed my parents for the divorce. I blamed myself for their divorce. I blamed myself every time I got molested. I blamed myself for nobody listening to me. Like, I internalized everything. And it just made me sicker and sicker. Like, I am telling you, like, I needed so much help. And it's just, and again, like, as I go, I'm gonna keep getting older. And like, I'm not surprised that I did the things that I did now. And I'm not saying that it was okay. Not in the least. Please don't misunderstand. I would never. But it just, I feel like I should have turned out. I feel like, I should have done worse. I should have ended up in jail. Really. Um, but that's part 3. Um, Part 4 shouldn't be as graphic. Um, and I am sorry. Um, you know, if anybody is watching this and you want somebody to talk to, please tell me. I I would, I'm not, I have time. And even if it's just to listen, I am very good at that. And again, there's a lot that I understand. If you just want someone, even if you just want to speak to someone who just understands, what it means to go through these things, um, I am available. Absolutely. Do not hesitate. So again, part 4, I don't think it's going to be this graphic, but I have to think about it. So, wait, what years am I covering? Okay, I'm up to 8. So, okay, we can move on to 9. Is that 4th grade? 4th grade. Yeah. 4th. Okay. Yeah, it shouldn't be as graphic. Okay. We're okay. All right. So, stay tuned for part 4.